His remit covers everything lichen and bryophyte that plant life do with regards to their conservation and outreach work. Many of you will know Dave from the excellent Back from the Brink and British Lichen Society recording meetings that he's organised in the past, particularly the Mockers Park one in 2018 and also the Rydal Park one in 2019. Personally, I have a lot to thank Dave for in terms of the continuous support with my work and my studies. So Dave, I just so look forward to hearing you speak about everything woodland in the UK. So Judith, if you could please share Dave's talk, that would be excellent.
Is this working?
Your screen is shared, but the video's not loaded. Ah, brilliant.
Dave Lamacraft. I work for the charity Plant Life as their lower plants champion. So I lead on our work on lichens and bryophytes across England and Wales. And today I'm going to take you on a virtual tour of some of the UK's pasture woodlands, wood pasture and parkland. To start with, I'm going to just have a quick look at these habitats and ask the question, well, what are they? Because it's a question that I used to ask and scratch my head over and still do, if I'm honest, to some extent. So to me, this is pasture woodland. This is in northwest Wales. It's a classic bit of temperate rainforest, really. And as you can see, it's grazed. And then to me, this is what I would call wood pasture. This is burn and beeches. And again, it's grazed. And here's a photo of burn and beeches from the late 19th century. And then this is Mockers Park in Herefordshire. So this is a classic deer park. So they all have two things in common. One is trees and the other is grazing animals. So to me, basically, we're talking about a continuum from pasture woodland, which is more trees than pasture, through to parkland, which is more pasture than trees. But to me, the kind of boundaries between those definitions are very much blurred. So here we go on our little tour. So we're going to jump in the mystery machine. We're going to start off up in northwest Wales at Dolmen. Then we're going to trip down the A470 to Mockers Park in Herefordshire. Jump on the M4 down to Savernake Forest in Wiltshire. Back on the M4 to Burnham Beeches just to the southwest of London. So starting in northwest Wales at Dolmen, this is a National Trust holding, quite a big estate they have there, and as I said earlier, it's very much a nice piece of temperate rainforest in one of the more hyperoceanic parts of Wales. This actual particular piece of woodland here is a former oak plantation, actually in the 19th century. But slowly being restored to something a little bit more natural. Thankfully, there's some really lichen-rich woodland adjacent to it, and that stuff is colonising back into the woodland quite quickly. It's a very good, very important Labarion site. It's got all 4 species of British Labaria. We have the only Welsh population of Parmigiana testacea, probably actually the only population of this, known population of this, south of Scotland. Similarly, we have a very good population of Fuscopilaria or Novicia sampiana. It's on quite a number of trees here on ash and oak, and also colonising fairly young sallow. Probably the largest population south of the Highlands, I would guess. There's only one site in England where it's on just 2 trees. And we also have a very good acid bark community here on birch and alder in particular, and on some of the oak. with a very good population of Menegatsia terebrata. And we're right in the heartland of the Parmelianopsis harescens range here. So this is a real speciality of this part of northwest Wales, and it's very abundant on sites like Dolmen. Here you can see it's fertile. You can see a little icidiate fruit in the centre of the photo there. So we're going to leave Dolmen behind and trip down through mid Wales on the A470 down to Mochas Park in Herefordshire. This is a beautiful site, especially on a sunny May day like this. So this was on a survey event that was organised between the British Life Society and a project I've been working on called Back from the Brink. So Mochas Park is an old deer park dating back to the 16th century or even older, with fantastic old oak trees. It's generally pretty open like this on the lower slopes, and it grades into something more akin to wood pasture on steeper slopes. Not just old oak trees, but it's got some wonderful old ash as well, along with some lovely old field maples and horse chestnuts. It's got a really good population of Lechalora sublevescens, so we're talking, a really good site basically for the Pertiseriata mamare community, the community that likes slightly damp bark, slightly rough bark on mature oak trees in particular, in well-lit conditions. So Mochas is ideal for this community really. It's perhaps towards the more acidic end of the spectrum, so it's got a lot of Lechalora sublevescens and much less of things like Lechalora quercicula, and surprisingly no Caloplaca herbidella, which we're half expecting to find, but a very good population of this Lechalora sublevescens. And there's quite a lot of really important trees on this site. So this is one tree, a lovely old oak, and you can see classic conditions for that Pertiseriata mamare community, a very well lit, open trunk. And this particular tree, as you can see from Mark Powell's lovely drawing on the right there, has Caloplaca lucifuga, Lechalora sublevescens, as Dimerella tavariciana or Conegonium tavaricianum, along with more typical species like the Frischia tribacchia, diploicia, Canassium salicinum, things like that. And on that survey visit, the British Lichen Society and Back from the Brink survey visit, we found Rhinodina exigua, new to the British Isles. And Mochas is also the only English site for Gaialecta olmai, so a formerly much more widespread species, a specialist of elm in particular. It's just known from Mochas now in England, where it's found quite a good population actually. It's pretty healthy and doing pretty well. But it's on a little outcrop of limestone in a lightly wooded part of the site. So we're going to leave those delights behind and jump back in our mystery machine and traipse along the M4 to Wiltshire and Savernake Forest. So this is another old hunting forest, famous for being a hunting forest of Henry VIII. It's part of an estate now of Tottenham Hall, the Earl of Cardigan. So Tottenham Hall used to be known as Wolf Hall. It's where Henry VIII met Jane Seymour on one of his many hunting trips here. And this particular part of the site here is one of the best remaining on the site. I mean, it's a huge forest, but much of it was planted up with an oak plantation in the 20th century, so very little of it remains open. And this particular part of the site has Caloplaca herbidella, one of the few sites in England for it. It used to be one of the main sites, if not the main site, for Caloplaca herbadella in England, with lots of records made by Francis Rose, for example. It's only known from a couple of trees there now, and it's not been seen fertile there for some time. This particular photo was taken from one of Ray's sites in mid Wales. So we're talking the Perticeretum amare community again, really. So well lit, old oak trunks, but at the more base-rich end of the spectrum. There is also quite a bit of Lecanora sublevescens on the site and trees with both species. It's also a very good site for the Lecanaptiditum premnea. So here we have Cresponia premnea, and this is a community which most of the world resource of this community is found in the UK. There's a little bit in France, but we have the bulk of this community. This is, the dry bark community on old trees and typified by Cresponia premnea, but hosts a whole load of other rare and scarce species. Then we have a very rich pinhead community at Savanac. There's about, I think, 13 or 14 species of pinhead there. Here we have Chenotheca hispidula. You can see it growing down the bark crevice there, along with the kind of typical associates of the Lecanaptis and the Praeria and Chrysothrix. And we also have, as indeed at Moccas as well, actually, a very good representation of the kind of wound track assemblages and communities. So Basidia incompta is relatively frequent on the site, especially associated with these beautiful old field maple trees, the kind of hollows inside them and the wounded bark on the field maples. And also Calema fragrans, known on an oak here, one of relatively few sites in England away from the New Forest. Here you can actually see it growing with one of its frequent associates in the New Forest, like the moss, pretty rare moss, Digodon forsteri. And again, we're going to leave the delights of Savanac behind and jump back on the M4 and nip up only an hour away to Burnham Beeches. Burnham Beeches is owned by the City of London. It's another old wood pasture, really, I think, this one. And it's a real special beach site. The true importance of it is something that we've only really discovered in the last couple of years after some initial exploration by Mark Powell and others. We've really found some really special stuff there. It's mostly associated with these amazing old beech pollards. This one in particular, I think, here has both Perennial nitida and Perennial nitidella, but it also has really good oak interest as well. So as I said just now, this is really a really special site for the kind of perennial communities of sort of slightly flushed rain tracks on sort of base-rich old beech bark. There really is quite a bit of Perennial nitida present on the site. Until we started looking, as I say, this is kind of myself and Neil really Neil especially in the last couple of years. It was thought to just be on one tree, and that tree was dead, and the reason we started looking was because we were going to transplant some of it from that tree because it was about to fall over. But much more of the nitida has been found, along with quite a bit of nitidella. So just leaving aside the species for a moment. So Britain has such an important population of ancient trees still, and ancient tree sites, and the lichens of which ancient trees are, of immense significance internationally. But these sites aren't without their management issues. and much of my work currently is around trying to sort some of these out on some of these sites. And one of the big ones really is this kind of generation gap issue, so the lack of future veteran trees basically. And this is obviously a difficult nut to crack, but we have been planting species on sites. So this is at Mockus, horse chestnut being planted. So you know, this can help to start to plug the gap into the future, but obviously by the time this gets to be a decent size, then the trees that it's replacing will be long gone. So something we have been doing a little bit of is what's called veteranization. So this is essentially just trying to introduce features of older trees into trees that are younger. So you can do this using various techniques with chainsaws, basically, where you induce rot into a tree or create sort of sap runs or rain tracks and pools, that kind of thing. And another particular issue is around the sort of infilling of the spaces around the big trees. So this at Savernake here was through planting in the kind of 1940s. This just puts pressure on the old oak trees, so they're not able to kind of function quite as they would do normally when they've been open grown. So it basically introduces competition and places stress on the trees, so they end up dying like the one on the left, or they just end up in poor condition like the one on the right. But things can be done about this, and this is a project that's been implemented at Savernake by Forestry Commission and Natural England to both give these big old trees some space, so what's called halo thinning around the trees, but they've also recently reintroduced grazing back into Savernake, so basically starting to restore that landscape to what it used to be before the planting in the 20th century. So as much of my work is around getting grazing back onto sites, I'll finish off with another picture of a Highland cow. And so thank you for listening and for watching, and also thank you to the various photographers for allowing me to use their photos. And also I'd like to say that we do have a membership offer on for BLS members over this weekend, so you can get 50% off of your first year membership with the code BLS, and you can get to that through the membership section in the Plant Life shop. Okay, so yeah, thanks again.
Dave, that is stupendous, and I love the idea of going from Wales to London. And I was thinking, how, you know, there are so many management issues, and I'm looking to see now who else is asking questions. But I wanted to ask one really about how important is pollarding in these communities.
I think pollarding is being fundamental to making or maintaining the interest, creating the interest and maintaining it over centuries. I think, you know, pollarding is thought to prolong the life of the tree by, you know, a couple hundred years at least. So it basically keeps the tree going longer. I think, I mean, most of those trees you were seeing at Burnham Beeches, they're all pollards, all beech pollards, and that really relates back to the historic management, really. So the pollarding was a way to get forage for animals, winter feed for animals, basically. Yeah. So I think that's one of the things I love about these habitats, is that link between kind of our human history and the natural history of these sites.
And the whole pollarding thing is such a problem, isn't it? Because I've experienced that in West Wales, Tyrcannel and things, you know, because you can't just re-pollard. You've got to, it's a very skilled process, you know, you can't create an ancient tree immediately.
Yeah, I mean, and I think so a lot of the problems we're dealing with now, I think, are because this kind of management of these sites has been out of fashion for a few hundred years. It's not just been decades, it's been a long time. So you can't go and pollard a 300-year-old tree very successfully, whereas you can a 20-year-old tree. So I think these things are coming back now, but it's mostly conservation management driven, I think.
Yes, and I think that that's the problem for parklands anyway, isn't it? With the nitrogen, there's so many issues. Wow, for nitrogen issues too, and you know, then there's the size of the site. You don't mention that, but I've been to parks like Dolmalinthlin, where I've had wonderful trees, but they're only about 5, and next time there were only 3. So loss of old trees is another problem, isn't it?
Yeah, it's I don't know how you fix that, because you can't conjure up, like you say, an old tree. So
You can't conjure up.
some of this veteranization stuff, I kind of have mixed feelings about it, because it feels a bit harsh on the tree. But if we don't try and do things like this, we're gonna lose the niche. We're gonna lose the habitats for the rare things that depend on them. So I kind of think we have to try these things.
Yes, and also it's just, they were managed in the past, so you have to experiment. So I don't seem to April, have I missed any Q&As? Here's one coming now.
Got it.
Yeah, I got. Might it be that wood pastures are being found to be good just now, like Burnham and Epping and even Moccas, because they are quickly improving from a low point? I guess with propagules from specimens that were hanging on by the skin of their teeth. Hope for us all. That's Juliet.
I think there's definitely hope for us all. I think there is hope for the world at large. I think places like Burnham Beaches is interesting, because I think basically that's been overlooked, the interest there. Perhaps slightly written off because it's close to London and they seem to be quite polluted. So I think it's just, one of the things that got me hooked on lichens in the first place was this kind of sense that you can go and discover stuff, and there's so much to be found. There's so much to be discovered still, even on these sites, really easily accessible sites close to large populations. So I think it's partly that we're just still finding stuff, and I think we've got illuminated hand lenses now which help enormously with finding things in bark crevices, for example. So I think it's partly that, but I think our site's getting better. I think sites are getting better when sites do actually seem to respond quite quickly to management in some respects. So whether it's in the North Wales rainforest or places like Moccas and Burnham, I think things will respond. So I think it's a combination of things.
And I suppose, protection of parklands was comparatively recent, wasn't it? So you didn't get that sort of protection of some of those special sites till comparatively recently.
No, and I think the future's always in the balance of it, really. I think any site that's dependent on grazing, the future is always slightly in the balance, because it goes in and out of fashion whether woodlands and wooded sites should be grazed and not grazed, but it's kind of implicit in wood pasture and a parkland that kind of has to be grazed. But then you need grazing animals, you need someone to look after them and own them and all that kind of stuff. So.
And I think it's so surprising that even near London you're getting some of these amazing crusts and things on these other, because when we were at Hyde Park, just outside Oxford, it's incredible really that you're not getting the macros, but you're still getting the micros. April, you're looking nervous. Have I overshot?
Getting you to stop talking, Pat, is difficult sometimes.
Okay. So Dave, thank you very much.
We're out of time, Dave. Thank you so much.
We're out of time.
Can I just say there are some questions that are still coming in, so if you wouldn't mind answering those, that would be brilliant.
Okay,
Very good. Pat, over to you again.